how do I deal with feelings of frustration and prevent resentment as I care for our teenage daughter with mental illness?
Tell me about your daughter.
She is in high school,
Okay.
and she's very talented, and she loves theater. But when she was 13, we started to notice that she was having some issues, and it seemed to me to be more than just angst. And it took us a long time, but we finally, the peak point for us was when I noticed that she was losing her hair, and it was dramatic enough that we could see the hair loss.
Yeah.
And so after a lot of phone calls with the pediatrician and with a behavioral psychologist, we finally diagnosed her with anxiety and ADHD. And so we began her treatment, and things were going well. She was still having trouble with impulse control and always moving, always going, dancing all the time. She was always a movement. And then suddenly, just a year later, it was the opposite. She didn't want to do anything. She didn't want to do anything that she was interested in. She would call home from school wanting me to pick her up because she didn't want to be there. And it was getting to the point where now we were starting to feel like it wasn't a small, just isolated incident. It was an ongoing issue. And I called the pediatrician and the psychiatrist and the psychologist again. And this is her third medication, but they went ahead and changed her medication again. And as I spoke to the psychologist, he goes, she's really too young at her age, at this point in time, she's 16, to diagnose with bipolar disorder. However, she is showing all the characteristics of the disease.
Okay.
And so we spent a lot of time bouncing between mania and depression.
Okay.
In addition, it's just a lot of doctor's appointments and things like that to keep up with.
So can I add, these are always very delicate conversations with parents, and fortunately and unfortunately, I've had this exact conversation probably 1,000 times in my career, okay? But normally I've got you in front of me and maybe your spouse in front of me, and we've got a relationship before now, and so I've got to bypass all of that and ask some pretty direct questions. But I'm only going to ask them if you promise me you'll hear them for what they are and you won't feel them as accusation. Is that cool?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about the ecosystem of your house.
We have 2 children. She's the youngest of the 2. Our marriage is solid over 20 years.
Okay.
She is, we have a strong value system within the home.
Does she feel a part of that or accused by that?
She is a part of that.
Okay.
She is a part of that value system. There are probably at times, especially as a teenager, that she might feel like she doesn't like our values in the sense that she doesn't necessarily like the rules that we have.
Oh, of course. She's a teenager.
You know what I mean? In that sense. But as far as this is how we have decided to have this home and raise this family. She feels a part of that.
Okay. So tell me about your resentment.
Well, when we first had decided to have children, I was a corporate executive, and I quit my job to be a mom.
Okay.
Because it was, and my husband and I agreed together because it was what was both fiscally and environmentally the best for our children.
Okay.
And so, and I don't regret it at all that I quit my job. But but the plan was that eventually I was supposed to go back to work, maybe not in that type of capacity, but go back to work, find something new or a new path for myself once the kids were mature enough and old enough that I didn't have the need to be at home all the time. And now we're seeing a psychologist weekly. We're seeing her pediatrician, her psychiatrist. She has 3 doctors that deal with physical manifestations of the possible physical manifestations of her mental illness, such as her hair loss and things of that nature. And that doesn't even include the regular things like a dentist and orthodontist and stuff like that.
So it's become your full-time job, right?
It's a full-time job, and especially with her being virtual, it's even more of now I have a teacher role on top of that. And so
can I give you permission
mm-hmm.
to be just sad and mad about all that?
Yeah.
And I know you feel like you have to toggle between, if I feel mad and sad, then I feel really guilty because she's my daughter. And also, if you don't choose to feel guilty, and you don't choose to feel sad, and you don't choose to feel mad, not at her, she's doing her best, but the whole just stupid situation, then you begin resenting your daughter.
And it's coupled with her outburst.
Mm-hmm.
And the psychologist says, he goes, mothers take the brunt of that.
They do.
When there's an outburst. He said, a lot of her anger when she's, and angry as a manic
mm-hmm.
is really difficult to handle sometimes.
It's
when
brutal.
She's angry and she's manic.
That's right.
And he tells me this to make me feel like I'm not, that this isn't uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that. But it still stings. Like, here's the person you're caring for that you've put your life on hold for. Like,
mm-hmm. So think of it this way.
A different part of my life on hold for.
Absolutely.
And
but think of it this way. It's easy when you have a child that's truly manic and that truly has those rage outbursts that are, if you've never seen one, they're astonishing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like your kid. It's like the Exorcist. It's like Linda Blair. You're like, what's happening right now? It's easy. I want you to begin to think of that as a kid with the flu who's throwing up.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's easy to, like when my daughter, she's 9, or my son's 15. Oh, he's a little bit older now, but if she was to run into my room in the middle of the night and say, Daddy, I'm sick, and then barf all over me, that'd be disgusting. I'd be frustrated. I'd be annoyed. But she, in her moment of pain, came to the safest place that she knows. And so if a kid truly is having emotional regulation challenges, no kid that's stable wants to say awful things to the closest person to him. But if you think about it as she's coming to the safest person that she knows and vomits, it's easy to take the cursing and the yelling and the I hate yous and extrapolate them to like your husband who's totally regulated, right? And to feel that level of pain. And I'm intellectualizing it. It's not going to make it feel better in the moment. But if you think of it as my kid's coming to the safest person that she knows, at least in your guts, you can go, it's amazing that she feels I'm that safe. And I would check with her psychologist. I have found some great success, at least in my career, not in the home life, because my kids don't struggle with this, but in a professional setting. There is some power to setting boundaries on that. You can be manic and you can be angry. You cannot say these words in this house. And I've seen some pretty remarkable success with that. I can't generalize that, and I don't know your specific situation, so obviously talk to your doctors about it. But there is something powerful about saying, I know you get spun up, and part of being 16 and managing bipolar 1, if that's what it ends up being, part of that is learning when you feel this thing coming on, what are our alternative behaviors as this thing starts to...
And that's part of the reason we let her be virtual, so
Perfect.
that she could kind of figure those things out.
She
in
can
a safe
practice.
environment.
There you go. She can practice. And so there is some intellectualizing. She's throwing up. She's coming to the safest person she knows. And possibly, if she's able to, hey, you're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to be upset. Here's your journal. I want you to write all this stuff down. If you want to go to coffee, I will stop what I'm doing and take you out somewhere. You can't scream expletives in my face. That's you choosing for this consequence or this consequence. Often it begins to get unbounded and people want to care and love and say you've got a disease and you've got this illness and it just begins to feel less and less and less that there's any sort of boundary at all. And so sometimes establishing some of those gives people, it sounds counterintuitive, but it gives you a safety, right? Like to my daughter, run in our room, but go barf in there. And you got to barf in the bathroom. You can't barf on me. You get what I'm saying? And I'll be right in there in the bathroom behind you when I hear you run in. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And all I can say is, I hate this for you, and you're not a bad mom if you feel mad or frustrated. And you're not a bad mom if you are super annoyed and wish you were back at your corporate job. You're not a bad mom. This is just a heartbreaking, sucky, day-by-day situation.
And I try to remember, as frustrating as for me, I can't imagine how she feels, because she feels like her body is betraying her.
That's the words. I've heard that sentence over and over. I'm being betrayed by my own body. And it's unnerving when you know intellectually, that's my mom and I love her. You know intellectually, this situation is not that big of a deal. It's just a 79. It's just a high C. But your body goes to DEFCON 1, right? It's unnerving. But I appreciate, I'm glad to know there's moms out there trying to make this thing work. You're not crazy.
So, and I know this, as long as she takes her medication and we figure out the right ones, I know that there's so much hope for her.
There is.
It's just, it's just kind of like spinning your wheels in mud. I'm just trying to get out.
There is. And the weekly coffee, and I know this sounds so pedantic, but the weekly coffee, asking her to go for walks with you, here's what I would love for you to do. If you begin to shift and give her a role, your mom needs to go for a walk and I need you to go with me. I need this. Will you do this for me? Then sometimes, not always, sometimes they can't do it. They can't get out of bed and it piles on the shame. But sometimes giving a kid a job or a role, not an overwhelming one, like, don't let your mom get mad. That's too much. No kid can handle that. But hey, I need to go for a walk and it makes my walks better when I get to walk with you. Would you do your mom a solid and come on a walk with me? And what you're getting is she's getting some movement in, she's getting some fresh air in, she's getting some sunshine in. All these things that we know are good for everybody, but especially kids struggling to get their feet underneath them. Ugh. I just say that, ugh. My hope is that there's some regulation that happens, and I'd love for doctors to do a blood test and see if there's any sort of hormone imbalance, if there's any sort of anything else going on here. But it may just be good old-fashioned BP1 in the early stages, and that's just hard. But yes, there is hope if you get with a team, and I like that you have a team approach here, and you'll get the meds dialed in. And by the way, over time, those meds will shift, and that's just part of the learning process here. But saying words like, I believe you, let's go for coffee, I like spending time with you, often gives kids just that little hint of, and man, sometimes that's all they need to take the edge off the high highs or the low lows. But it's a big old mess, but just for whatever it's worth. And I can't solve that. You're with a team of professionals, so good for you. But just know you're not crazy. You're a good mom. If you don't feel guilty and you don't say out loud or don't exhale and say, I wish I was back in my corporate job, I wish I wasn't dealing with this, then yes, it will turn to resentment. And your kid will absorb the fact that they know they're a burden. If you'll allow yourself to feel these heavy things, especially with a person or two people or a group or a therapist, then you're going to be able to show up and exhale, and your kid's going to know my mom wants me around. And for most kids, that's the foundation of any sort of emotional well-being.